Hi everybody, this is Phil Haloka from Complete Captive Management Services. And today we're talking about who can and who should own a captive insurance company. But before we talk about who can and who should, we have to revisit a term. And that term is called private insurance company. That's what a captive is. It can only issue a policy to its owner. The captive cannot go to the market and sell a policy to anyone else besides the owner of the captive. Okay? So, a direct writer captive can issue policies to these guys, but a reinsurance captive does not issue a policy. Therefore, you can have more creative ownership within a reinsurance captive or a group captive, fronted group captive, than you can with a direct writer. Okay? So, who can own a direct writer? Well, a C corporation. Clearly, that's an option. An S election, sometimes known as a pass-through. So that's when an individual owns a business and those profits of the business pass through to the individual's individual tax return. A nonprofit and a government entity can own a direct writer captive. A reinsurance captive, a fronted captive. An individual can own a reinsurance captive because remember, the reinsurance captive is not issuing a policy. Therefore, an individual can own it. Just like a direct writer, a C Corp, S election, nonprofit, and government can also own a reinsurance captive. Now this, a PORC, a producer owned reinsurance captive. This could be a broker, an individual broker, a brokerage firm, like the big houses, the big brokerage houses. It could be a carrier. An insurance carrier could own a captive insurance company. Okay? So PORC is producer owned reinsurance captive. Now, if you're both, if your captive direct writes and is reinsuring a commercial carrier, these entities can own the two-way captive, and these individuals, but these guys and this guy cannot own a direct writer captive. Okay? The more important question is who should? Well, in our ranking system, based on our experience, mature businesses have the best chance for a successful captive insurance experience. Okay? Mature business to us is roughly 5 years of profitable business. Okay? Cash flow stable. In the first year or two, it is more expensive to start up or join a captive insurance arrangement. Therefore, the employer has to have consistent, stable cash flow. In addition to the startup costs, captive insurance is a form of self-insurance, which means there could be waxes and wanes of cash inflows and cash outflows. Okay? So if a business is extremely sensitive on weekly, monthly cash ebbs and flows, captive insurance may not be an ideal solution. Sophisticated. Now this may be a controversial label, but make no mistake, a business that doesn't fully understand or fails to grasp why a captive insurance solution is ideal, then they're probably not ideal. Okay, so there's a level of sophistication, some business acumen that goes along with forming a captive insurance company. The executive team has to entirely buy in. If one or two of the 3 or 4 members of the executive team want a captive, but the other 2 or 3 don't, it's going to be a problem throughout the year or years because everyone needs to be on the same sheet of paper. Okay? Participatory. You need to participate in your own insurance company. You're going to own it. Your corporation is going to own the captive. Therefore, the amount of work involved in running your business should be considered as important to run your captive business. However, your captive is going to outsource a lot of the daily insurance company requirements to a captive manager. And yes, the captive manager takes 90% of the workload off of the business that owns the captive, but that 10% is vitally important. That captive is going to have a board meeting. That captive may need to travel to the domicile to conduct that board meeting at least once a year. That captive needs to engage in risk control and loss mitigation service providers to make sure that their captive is financially successful. Okay? So, who can is pretty easy. Who should is a more complex question. That's it for today. We will see you next week with control versus governance. Bye now.